the sponsors and the European Union that is encouraging Ukraine to go on with the fighting. And I think that brings up an important chicken and egg question, whether any peace deal on Ukraine is possible or realistic without Russia and Europe sitting down, in some format and negotiating the future security architecture in Europe.
Actually, I was very happy to hear, even I'm not fan of President Trump, to be honest. I was happy to hear that there were these first moves of normalization and talks, reestablishing the diplomatic talks between Washington and Moscow. That is good for the world peace. Now you mentioned the European actor, and here we see this somehow confused, erratic West that is divided and sometimes united, and they are like in a nightmare of a bad divorce when two partners don't know who is in charge and who wants what. So here in this situation, with all my skepticism about the sincerity of Washington, I would find the European partners being peace spoilers. We saw that during the Victory Day, this adolescent behavior of the leading European politicians behaving as in a party, and it doesn't look like they see the whole seriousness of the suffering of the Ukrainian people and, of course, the whole battlefield. So Europe is now a strange phenomenon. I cannot say European Union because UK is back in the company. Then we say we see all these different formats of negotiating within the so-called European family. So it is very hard to define who Europe is right now and how they go through all these, I would say, rather worrisome militaristic transformations, call for rearming Europe, or German Chancellor calling for making Germany military force again.
I want to ask you, as a social scientist, do you think some degree of bloodshed is inevitable when you have these large state entities collapse or disintegrate?
I still believe that there have been chances to avoid the bloody collapse of Yugoslavia that I still consider my homeland. I was born in that country and I love that. So that at that time, we had a lot of good analysis of peace researchers, especially from the northern part of Europe, who said it could have been prevented. It could have avoided military conflicts, but some Western countries were already involved in their strategic thinking, especially around Slovenia, Croatia, and so on and so forth. So everything can be, and especially Ukraine. Let me just remind and emphasize that was the most predictable and most preventable conflict in Europe in the recent years. So it was made by intent. I'm sure it was not spontaneous, that things were just going out of control. No, somebody wanted the war. Let me remind you that NATO lost the war in Afghanistan and NATO lost the war in Ukraine too. So despite all this role-playing and rebranding that is happening now, it was NATO member states that were engaged, and Ukraine was a de facto NATO country even in the first mandate of Donald Trump, if not before. So it was rearmed by the West, taken care by the West, instead of nurturing this neutrality that Ukraine initially had as a strategic option. They actually pushed it into this NATO embrace and militarized it. So NATO depends on the wish of the White House. Without United States, there is no NATO, and Europeans are totally irrelevant and totally impotent in military terms. There is a big difference between the geopolitical positioning of the former Yugoslavia and its successor states. So that sort of state building was of a different sort throughout a longer period of time. Here we have Ukraine. Ukraine was in the heart of the West since early 90s of 20th century. So Euromaidan did not happen, out of people's will. It was a colored revolution. It was designed. So everything that followed, Minsk agreements were a farce, as we know now, thanks to the confession of Angela Merkel. So Ukraine has a very important strategic position for the West, and they still think of themselves as hegemon. So here, the situation is much more dangerous in terms of escalation, and that's why these negotiations should have taken a different dynamic. And so far, we have seen actually even Germany suffering from the blow up of the Nord Stream, for example, and they did not react it at all. And now they suffer the economic consequences. So Europe is self-defeating in this whole mess, not even caring about its own interest of the European people. And my diagnosis as a political scientist is that we deal here with very dangerous people because they belong to so-called kakistocracy, a rule of people who are least incompetent, very unscrupulous, and really we don't know whether they're serious or not in playing all these games. And that's why they are putting in danger the entire world. Here, Ukraine is no actor at all. And even if they sit at the table, I'm sure that somebody is going to whispering into their ear what is good to accept or not. And I haven't seen a real understanding of the very serious situation in Ukraine. As you mentioned, they're losing the ground. They're losing manpower. The public opinion is changing, but of course the media would not allow that side to be heard widely. So how the society behaves is easy to understand. It is a psychosis, but also media propaganda. Media propaganda supported by Western donors, NGOs. We have the same effect in my part of the world because we come now from a NATO part of family. So there is a total brainwashing and actually listening only to one side of the story, not the other side. Unfortunately, I believe that Zelensky is just a puppet, and there are forces behind that I already mentioned are not very I cannot see them as honest brokers because they have been involved into this proxy war for 3 years and more than that. So you cannot expect someone who had been involved and is still involved into providing military support, assistance, intelligence, targeting, drones, and everything that we have seen, all at a sudden, overnight, to become a peacemaker or to show a goodwill, good faith into engaging into they are addicted to war. Unfortunately, the West knows much more about making wars rather than peace. Unlike the rest of the world, who is trying to work on economic globalization, trade, cooperation, multipolarity, the West is addicted, and addiction is a very hard thing to really cure.
So, especially if you don't recognize that it exists.
Absolutely, yes. The first thing is to recognize that I am an addict and I should take care of myself. So we are going to see more interesting developments in the future, unfortunately.